Welcome to the Endurance Drive podcast.
Our mission is to share the key principles that structure our approach to endurance training and coaching.
I'm Jim.
And I'm Katie.
Katie, today I want to start with something different. I want to possibly give Garmin a compliment.
Oh my gosh.
I know, but it's interesting. So we discussed a couple weeks ago that I've gone back to running a little bit, and I'm running without a heart rate strap just because one is I probably don't need to. Number two is just when I enjoy running, right? I just want to discover the joy of running and just listen to my body. But the day I was running and I happened to glance down at my watch and I wasn't really paying attention to the pace, but somehow I just looked down. I don't know what I was looking for, but I saw the number and I said, wow, that seems to be about right, my heart rate. And I realized I'm using wrist heart rate. And normally with all of the other versions of Garmin that I've ever used, it seems to always pick like the middle to top of your zone 3, zone 4 and say, you're not running without heart rate strap. So your heart rate is 165. And so year after year after year after year, I look down at my watch and go, I forgot my heart rate strap and my heart rate, this says 165. It's not 165. I looked down at my watch and it said like, you're basically like 127, 128. And I was running really casual. I was like, hey, that's about right. And I sped up a little bit. And I was like, oh, wait, the heart went up just a little bit. I was like, wait a minute, is this thing right? So anyway, this is the Garmin 965. I thought, oh my gosh, has Garmin either A, improved their hardware, or B, have they just like improved their algorithm? It just says, hey, when they don't have a heart rate strap, just pick a number, like a low number. Let's stop going high. Let's go low. I don't know, but I wanted to point it out because I'm always picking on Garmin.
I'm so glad to hear that. And honestly, that probably helps with so much anxiety for so many of our athletes who are so frustrated with the state of Garmin wrist heart rate. I will say the technology is out there for wrist heart rate to be better. We see it, I think, with like Apple Watch, for example. It's not perfect, but I don't think it's that much worse than like a somewhat wonky Garmin heart rate strap that you have. So it's possible that Garmin is adopting some of that new technology. And as always, we reserve the right to be wrong. So maybe the things we've said in the past about wrist heart rate are not so good. However, if you were doing something like a lactate threshold test, I still would say probably wear the strap because I feel like it's right maybe like 70% of the time, 80% of the time, and that 20% of the time that it's wrong will be the time that it really, really, really matters for you. So just be aware it can still be a little crazy. And it's funny because I actually had wrist hurt and I just forgotten my strap, or maybe my strap died during a big adventure recently. And I was like hiking very slowly downhill and I was getting a 175 reading. So
Perfect.
I'm not sure, but I think I have like the Phoenix. I have a different model than you, so maybe it's just not up to date on the technology.
Well, that's a new one too. So I don't know. Who knows? I guess what do they say? A pat on the back is just 1 foot above a kick in the ass, I guess. It's like,
I've never heard that one, but let's put that into our podcast canon of various things that we say.
That's along with brace of impact. Yeah. All right. So what do we got today? What are we doing, Katie?
Well, I love today because we had some very complimentary insights. We actually spent a couple minutes reorganizing our outline right before we started so we could have some smooth transitions. But I think our first topic is going to be on the spirit of adventures. And I'm coming off a couple of really, really fun adventures recently that I'm excited to share with folks. So I'm going to jump right in if you'll indulge me.
Yeah. I mean, you've been crushing the mountains, so let's go. I want to hear all about this.
All right, so I'm reporting on 2 different trips I've done, both on a Tuesday because I've sort of moved my summer meetings around so I can have these Tuesdays free, and I've been going for midweek adventures, and the weather has lined up well to do that. Usually we're bitching about the weather, but I'm actually not bitching about the weather right now because it's been good recently. It's usually that like late summer kind of cool, super, super nice out, lower humidity, good air quality. So last week I headed up to the White Mountains and I did a presidential traverse, which I've done a bunch of those before. I actually realized kind of going back in the archives that this was my 13th Prezi before, but it was my first pregnant Prezi. So that definitely switches things up. And we've got to kind of work on the New Hampshire 48 list for this little mango-sized baby. So that was really fun. And then this past week, I went back to the White Mountains and I did a loop hitting Mount Cannon and 2 of the Kinsmans, which are other 4,000 footers. And I actually found the loop the day before, just looking for a random route, realized it was on the fastest known time FKT website. And there were a couple times that I thought I might be able to beat for a fastest known time for the female category if I just pushed a little bit. So I said, you know what, like I'm going to go up and have myself an adventure day, and went for that Cannon and Kinsman's FKT, and it was awesome. I had a really great time doing it. So I've got some insights from kind of both of these experiences. The Prezi is a longer day, so if you're not familiar, the Presidential Traverse, we talk about it all the time. It's usually kind of like an 18 plus, almost 19-mile day. It hits almost 9,000 feet of elevation gain, and I believe it goes over 7 4,000 footers. These are really tall mountains, so for the whites category of 4,000 footers, these are in the 5,000s usually, and Mount Washington hits over 6, so pretty big mountains, a lot of alpine terrain, but really, really cool. And I went up and did it with a friend. And so the first insight that I had with that was that Fueling is really, really important. We talk about it all the time, but I found that it was really helpful for me for a day that was going to take me like 8 hours to really try to get in some real food, specifically kind of at the peak of the mountain when I was about to go downhill, and then save those quick carbs, things like gels or liquid, for uphills, mostly because it's harder for me to digest things at high heart rates. But I think this is probably advice that could apply to Ironman athletes too, for example. If you're on the bike, it's usually easier to digest than if you're on the run. And if you're going downhill, think about like, okay, I'm kind of climbing, I'm headed towards the keen descent. I used to always slam like a macro bar, which has a little bit more protein and fat right before that big descent. And then when it was later in the day, my stomach was not as happy. I was saving those gels and that liquid. So I don't know about you, Jim, on fueling when you think about real food versus this like quick carb stuff, but for super, super long days, it's hard for me to get by on gels alone. And so that's why I'm saying like, all right, we're slamming the breakfast sandwich on the top of Mount Madison, and then I'm gonna kind of climb down more slowly, lower heart rate and let it digest.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason to do these big adventures is to eat as many pastries as you possibly can. So so yeah, I'm all in. And Coke, I love. You know what? I never drink Coke outside of these big days, but boy, I really look forward to Coke.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I will say I had some Coke on top of Washington. Washington is great on the Prezi because there is actually like a full-fledged cafeteria situation with all the people that drove up or took the cog railway up. And I bought Coke and I actually put it in my soft flask, which was amazing because then I was like two peaks later somewhere that there was no Coke to be had and I had it in my soft flask. So that was a lot of fun. I also found this is going to be my gear pick of the week to forecast it, but Rice Krispie treats, amazing source of carbs. I was slamming those. So that was really, really fun. But I would say, like, when you aren't craving the usual, like fig bars, macro bars, beta fuel, whatever it is, go for something different like Coke or Rice Krispie treat. And usually the carb content, if you look at the back, is like basically similar to what you would get in a fancy, expensive gel.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, we keep joking about this sort of Nature's Bakery fig bars thing, but I think we came around to that because we realized, hey, this is the most really economical way to get 40 grams of carbs in, and they were quite good and they were digested well. And so, yeah, I think there's all kinds of talk about high carb fueling and this and that. And again, I like to call it sort of appropriate fueling, but appropriate fueling could be it doesn't have to be all this astronaut food. It can just be like we talk about this, banana bread, right? Chocolate chip cookies, Rice Krispie treats. Did you have a hot dog on top of Mount Washington, Katie?
I did not have a hot dog, but I did get hot chocolate, which also really, really hit the spot. It was a little bit cold up there. And that actually brings me to another insight where if you are going into the alpine zone, which means that there are no trees growing up there, the weather can change a lot more quickly than it can kind of below tree line. And so I think some good advice for anyone who's adventuring in that terrain is you should always bring gloves and a hat, and you should always bring a lightweight puffy. I think, Jim, you and I have like sometimes brought the puffy, sometimes not. And I think one of my rules for pregnancy was like, let's not be stupid. Like, yes, we can be fast and light. Yes, we can be efficient. But if you get injured, you might need that puffy. And I know that it's been a good day, for example, if I used one less layer than I had, like if there was one layer that I never touched in my bag, that's fantastic. If you are wearing every single layer that you bought, that's sort of a sketchy situation to be in the first place. So I always say, like, be smart and probably pack that lightweight puffy. We love the Patagonia Micro Puff. It's teeny. It looks like basically a little loaf of bread in your bag and it weighs about the same as that. So there are good options out there and we can link them in the show notes.
Yeah, Katie and I, we used to always say like, "Oh, if something happens on this day, especially in the wintertime, we'll just put everything on that we have and we'll just suffer it out." And then, then I broke my leg in a bank parking lot. It was like that was pretty painful and pretty awful. And I thought, if I actually broke my leg up in the mountains, like you're in really, really big trouble. And having done a bunch of mountain rescues, you're probably, you're 6 to 8 hours from getting extracted, probably from someplace. And that's on a good day as well, too. So one of my takeaways from getting injured was going back to the mountains was, hey, I need to add in that hat, the gloves, the puffy, and in the summertime, right? Not just in the wintertime, but like bring some warm stuff because if something happens, you need to have plan B and plan C.
Yes, and related to that, you also should have good bailout options. This is something that I've definitely implemented a lot in pregnancy, but should be doing all the time is know the route and know where you can bail if you need to. So I knew, for example, if I got to Washington and really wasn't feeling good, there are ways to get down from there. And I knew that basically on every single peak before that, here are all the ways to get off the mountain. If you're new to some terrain, you do want to figure that out. And then make sure that if you're with a group, you're checking in kind of at every checkpoint of like, are we both feeling good? Is this a good place to keep going? I was also using kind of the set point idea that you talked about, Jim, was I knew I had to get to Mount Washington feeling really, really good. Because that's still, you've got another 8.5 miles to go and it's easier terrain than you've been on, but it's still not easy going forward. So I knew that if I was feeling really, really compromised at Washington, then probably it was not a good call to keep going. And for me, a good sign that things are compromised is if I start to trip a lot or stumble a lot, that means that I'm getting really tired. I'm probably getting hungry. I'm probably low carb. I'm getting clumsy. And that can kind of lead to that face plant in the whites that you really, really don't want. So for me, that's a cue to say, like, all right, reset. We need to eat some sugar. Let's see if the clumsiness goes away. And then it ended up being fine. But especially when I have like precious cargo on board, I'm like, we don't want a sharp rock directly to the abdomen right now. Like that would not be a great situation. So nice cue is like have those bailout options. And if you're tired, definitely eat something.
Yeah, relaxing is not your friend in the alpine zone.
No, it is not. Yeah, the ankles held up together, but there were some sketchy moments for the ankles up there.
Are you taping your ankles at all?
I've been taping them a little bit. Yep. Yeah. I still kind of need help on that exact right taping technique. Like I've had PTs help me with it before and they seem to be really good at it. And then I do it and I'm uncomfortable and it's not exactly right. But I do think it helps with a little bit of support. And also getting a shoe that's helpful, like the Solomon S Lab Ultra, which I wear, does have sort of this ankle gaiter that is certainly more stable than my carbon Hokas, where I like basically roll my ankle walking around my house wearing those. So I've kind of eased off on the carbon shoes. But they even make some shoes that I've considered looking into that are like a trail runner that has a higher ankle. So that's an option maybe if things get really bad for me that I would consider bringing out just because I'd rather kind of wear the weird shoes and still get to go in the mountains than just give up on the mountains because of my loose ankles.
Wait, aren't we a triathlon podcast? What's going on here? We're talking about adventures, talking about mountains.
I know we are. Well, I think that there are some insights that do apply to races, but I want to bring us back to this constant refrain that we've talked about so much is that I think that mountain fitness is what has made my triathlon career like as decent as it's been. I think the strength that you get in the mountains is something that translates to so many other sports and the ability to say like, hey, I've done 13 Prezis before. I know that I can do an Ironman. I've moved my body for that amount of time a whole bunch before and it was really, really fun. So this is yet another plug. I think this is also a nice transition into a listener question that we got, which is, hey, I want to do some big stuff in the whites, but I'm not quite ready for Prezi Pemi level. What can I do out there? And so we've linked in the show notes. We actually have a list that we put together for a podcast way back when on some of our favorite hikes in New England, kind of from the easiest to the hardest, starting with things like Mount Monadnock, which is actually in the state of Massachusetts. Who knew Massachusetts had anything that was worthwhile in terms of big mountains, but it's a really cool hike, up to things like Cardigan, Kearsarge, et cetera. And then all the way up to like these harder hikes like the Prezi and the Pemi. Like anything, we always say it's good to work your way up, but I could nerd out on White Mountains hikes like anytime. Like just call me, like text me. I would talk to you about this whenever. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions on some of these hikes, because I really do think now is the best time to do it. Like it's the fall. Most people are done or wrapping up their triathlon seasons. And if you want to lay some baseline fitness for next year, you will absolutely crush it.
Yeah, we always joke about like we're mountain athletes who happen to do triathlon, but the reason why, like you said, is because this is such a great way to build your durability, right? And it's just, I don't know, for me, it's a lot nicer and almost easier to spend 6 to 8 hours sort of walking around the woods and the mountains and looking at things than always maybe 6 to 8 hours on your bike, because that can be really difficult, right? So yeah, get out there, folks, and enjoy some mountains this fall.
Yeah. And I think this is a nice little segue to, this question about sort of homegrown adventure. So I did like a homegrown FKT that I was like, I'm just going to go kind of hardish for the mountains for 4 hours and see how that is. And it was really, really fun. But I think a lot of people are intimidated by the idea of just getting started on adventuring. And I like to kind of send out a reminder that adventuring doesn't need to be even traveling up to the mountains. Like there are often some really, really good adventures that you can do directly out of your backyard, even if you live in the city of Boston or the greater Boston area or wherever. So Jim, do you want to take this one and maybe just tell people how we think about getting started with adventuring if you're just like, okay, I'm new to an area or I haven't really explored outside of my backyard. Where do I go? What do I do? How do I do it?
Yeah, it is super overwhelming. You say you moved someplace new, right? And you go, okay, where do I go? And I remember having this when I moved back from Alaska back to here, going, okay, where do I go? What do I do? And I've been exploring some stuff in northern New Hampshire recently. And again, I've been saying like, okay, like I know some stuff, but like there's so much more to do out here. So like, where do I go? What do I do? So anyway, I recently had a couple conversations with 2 new athletes who live around this area, and they're saying, well, where do you go? Where do you go bike and run? And I kind of laughed, and I was just like, but just like, go out the door. Like, what's the deal? Like, you have moved to one of the greatest training grounds in the US. Like, just go outside. And kind of the more I thought about that, I was like, that wasn't the best answer in the world. It wasn't very nice, and it wasn't very productive. So I thought, okay, what have I done in the past, and what am I currently doing now when I want to go start adventuring? So the first thing I'd recommend folks doing is that I assume most people who listen to us have a Strava account. But if you don't have a Strava account, open up a Strava account and use the Strava's global heat map. And the global heat map basically is this is the place that most people go, whether it's biking or running or other things as well too. But the global heat map will just light up and it'll show you in like dark blue, like here is a really popular route in this area. So you could just start with like, okay, I live here. Here's the global heat map. Oh, look, there's a great 5 mile loop, 10 mile loop, anyway, starting from my door, whatever it is. But just go in there, create a route using the global heat map, and then, just create that route. And then just, you can sync that right to your smart device. You can sync it to your Garmin watch, your Garmin computer. And there you go. You've got a place that's very popular and probably the most popular roads and trails for hiking and biking in your area. The second thing that you could possibly do is, again, in Strava, they have these segments and they sort of like consider them sort of intervals, right? But there's usually big hills or some place. And then people say, okay, this is this segment. We're going to compete for the leaderboard. And what's interesting is you don't have to necessarily compete for the leader in Strava, but you can look at, and what I've done in the past is I've looked at some of the fastest or some of the most active riders who are sort of on a lot of the segment leaderboards, and you'll notice them. You'll start seeing names over and over again on the segment boards in your area. And then I go to their profiles and I say, okay, well, obviously those folks probably, A, they live around here, and B, they're probably pretty familiar with the area and they're probably out quite a bit doing biking and running. So I'll like follow them or go to their Strava accounts and be like, hey, what's their usual loops? And you'll find that there's, most of us, it's fun to go into adventuring, but also most of us have our usual loops. And you'll start to say, okay, look, there's someone who goes up, they go up Route 5 and then on Route 10. Okay, that's a popular route, right? So you'll quickly learn something from, I don't know if it's creeping on other people's Strava accounts, but you'll learn quite a bit from checking out other folks. Third thing I would do is we talk about is leveraging your bike computer. And so like recently I've been building a lot of these new dirt and gravel routes and I've been putting them on my Garmin 540 or my Garmin 1050. And these are actual very specific Garmin units for your bike. The 1050 is definitely my favorite because it has a really big and it has a very clear color screen. Plus it has preloaded maps for Europe and other places. And that's also for my middle-aged eyes, it's much easier to see the 1050. I will say it's very expensive. So I just recently got one. I've been holding out for a long time, but it really has clear navigation, and that clear navigation really just reduces the friction and the stress of exploration at your door. The fourth thing you could do is I've been experimenting with Ride with GPS, and I put a link here, but this is also, it's sort of like a Strava, but it's a little bit more beefier than Strava, and it's another great resource for planning and exploring. Their global heat maps, especially in the remote areas, are really robust, and I think they're just more sort of hardcore like trail runners and gravel riders who share their routes with Ride with GPS. And so it's really my top choice now for this remote gravel planning. And like I say, it's a little bit easier and harder to use in Strava. It's got a lot of functions to it, but it's certainly well worth it. And then sort of my last point here, it's called don't chase perfectionism because I tend towards this perfectionism. I spend a lot of time trying to create like the perfect route. But the reality is that a line on a computer map only tells you so much. And so the best way to learn about your area is just really just to get out the door and ride. And I have to remind myself that, yes, I will get lost. And yes, the planned route may not work for me, may not work for the bike that I'm riding or the skills that I have, or I'll have to stop. Like, yes, I'll have to stop and check things out and look at the map, right? But what I do is I'll always discover something new. And then I come back later and I look at my map and I say, oh, look, there's, now I know something about this area, and I come back with a little bit more knowledge and I make my next route and try to plan around that. So anyway, actually, I lied. My last point here is tap into the community, which is like most places have a regular group ride or runs. So just join them. And that's really the fastest way to learn great routes, meet new people, and plug into a community that can bring some joy and health and adventure to your life.
Yeah, I love this. These are really, really great tips. And this actually reminds me of, when I was at Dartmouth, I did my undergrad there, and I really started getting involved in this one kind of group ride. We call it the Wednesday Night Worlds, but it's called Upper Valley Velo, and they have a Wednesday ride, I believe this summer after my sophomore year. And I really had no idea what was even in the area of the Upper Valley other than just like Hanover and the surrounding towns until I joined that group. And that was the best way for me to say, like, okay, here is someone who's going to lead me on a ride and plan out the route. And I remember we did this one ride that was around Moose Mountain, which is like kind of a big mountain. It's some back gravel roads. I was on like a shitty Walmart bike and I'm kind of like, okay, we're figuring this out. I think it probably took 2.5 or 3 hours, which was a solid hour and a half longer than any ride I had ever done in my life before. I was with a friend who like basically hadn't had any food the entire day and I had to feed him my one gel. So between the two of us, we're eating like 30 grams of carbs for this 3-hour ride. And I came back being like, oh my gosh, the world is my oyster. There's so much cool stuff here, including a thing called Moose Mountain. And it's just so, so, so cool. So all this is to say, like, these are such great resources. And these people who are leading these community rides have been doing this forever. So even if community stuff isn't really your thing, I mean, I'm sorry for you if that's the case, but if you're like, no, I like to do my own thing, just go to 1 or 2 rides and you will pick on routes. And then you can also just stay on their listservs, like stay on that email list and you will see the routes that they email out every single week. And that mailing list, I never really ride with them anymore just because I'm not up there. And yet that list still gives me ideas for routes sometimes. So that's a good resource too, is to just always be on those lists.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Actually, yeah, I just actually hit some of those lists the other day because I was looking for some new gravel routes, and I found somebody who's posting a bunch of gravel routes, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, look at this!" So again, I haven't been to one of those group rides in a long time. I really value them, but what I really value right now is just the local knowledge, right? And people saying, "Hey, here's a great route," and I'm posting it out here. I'm like, "Oh, thank you so much."
Yeah, totally. And one other thing I'll add to this too is if you want to apply these principles to, say, adventuring in the mountains, like go on the heat map and pan over, for example, the White Mountains, and you will see the best routes to do all of these really big mountains. And something else you can do is I found my route for the other day by literally just Googling, like, okay, I want to hit Cannon and the Kinsmans, and then found this fastest known time route. You don't have to be going for an FKT to find some really, really cool routes that people have put together. And often the fastest known time website, which we can link in the show notes, is known for these like colossal routes. It's like who's got the fastest known time on the Appalachian Trail, but also there can be like an 11-mile trail thing that hits a couple of 4,000 footers. And that's really fun to do too. And sometimes you'll find that there's actually quite low hanging fruit in terms of getting an FKT. But even if there's not, you can get route inspiration from that. And even more importantly, you can get really good trip reports. So people who do those routes will write like, hey, this was really rugged in this area, or this was a snowy day and this is what happened. So I find that can be helpful for mountain adventuring as well.
Yeah, actually, we put a link to a good blog for 6 easy moderate New Hampshire hikes on our list up here in the show notes, and that was really cool because I was sort of we were talking about this, and we looked back at our list and said, well, there's got to be other mountains, and I did some googling around, and I found this blog, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, some of these mountains I know about, and other ones I don't know about, but all the pictures looked kind of similar, and I was like, huh, that's just kind of cool. Like I don't know, I haven't been up a couple of these mountains. This is a really great resource. So yeah, again, like blogs, there's lots of good things out there, and you'll know when you hit something, you're like, okay, this is a person who seems to be maybe my skill level, right, and my interest level, and the blog, the first one, this blog really hit me. I thought this is a great resource. So anyway, yeah, there's lots out there.
Can I throw some shade on something that I think is not a good resource, by the way, in this whole
Yes,
department? So
yes.
when I was also trying to find my route before I made it to the FKT website, usually the first thing that pops up if you search like hike Mount Cannon, for example, is a link to All Trails. And I'm sure that if you get a subscription to All Trails, it's totally fine, but they have this super annoying paywall that you cannot get behind, but they lead you to believe that you can get behind it. So I actually have a bone to pick with All Trails. And my other feedback is that you can find the information contained in All Trails on many other free sources. So I usually am not the type of person who's going to pay for All Trails just because I don't think that their difficulty ratings are that useful. Easy for them is like, okay, a flat walk on pavement, and hard is like anything more than 5 miles. So you're kind of like, well, maybe not exactly, but they have this super annoying paywall. So I am not going to Gear Pick of the Week recommend All Trails, even though it is subscription based. Maybe I could be wrong. Maybe if I paid, I would like it more, but I think you can find the information online. So if you are going to these links and you're like, oh, I'm so frustrated, I can't find it, just use the heat map and you will be completely fine.
I do use All Trails every once in a while. They do have good trail maps on there, but you're right. They keep suggesting things like, you do this mountain, do that mountain, go this direction. And I'm always like, how do I get rid of the information they're trying to feed me all the time here? And I think they might do good offline maps. But what I discovered today, actually, with Ride by GPS, the app I'm using now, and I'm actually using it on the web, is that I did a trail run today around an area, and there's a lot of trails in this area. So I actually found that you could download the route. It's very easy to do, and you make a route within Ride with GPS, and you download the route in the application. It'll actually download all the map data around that route as well too. So a number of times today, I actually stopped at intersections and I pulled out my phone and I looked and I'm like, okay, I'm here, and I can see the blue dot, but then I can see all the other trails, and I'm like, oh, okay, great. And it was really a huge game changer for me. So I'm gonna start using that more because a lot of places that I tend to end up, or even I both end up, is there's not a lot of cell reception out there.
Yes, and that's something to be aware of too for emergencies. I don't know if we recommended this before, but if you're going really remote places, something like a Garmin InReach is also pretty useful. Like I will take that when I'm doing solo stuff in the mountains just because I'm not sure if I'm going to have service, and that's great for emergencies. I have, knock on wood, never had to use it for anything, but it's almost like the insurance policy of bringing a puppy. It's like if you never ever have to use your Garmin InReach, that's perfect, but it's really good that you have it because you don't want to be in a situation where you really wanted it, you didn't have it.
Have you tried the Apple satellite SOS messaging yet?
Luckily I haven't had to, so no, I haven't. But have you?
No, I have not. But apparently you can point this new iPhone 16 or something at a satellite and you can actually message people,
Wow.
text people. I'd say there's a few caveats, like you have to have sent them a message before or something. And I actually have not tried it yet, but some people are using that as a substitute for the Garmin InReach. But I still have the Garmin InReach. The downside of the Garmin InReach is that you always have to pay a monthly fee, and so I've been paying a monthly fee for the Garmin InReach, which I got after my accident because I realized, like, again, I went down to the bank parking lot. That was pretty easy because people were working at the bank and I just came out and they found some guy screaming in their parking lot. So that was pretty easy. That was an easy 911 call. But if that was out in the mountain somewhere, I would have been really screwed.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I have not used it, and I think that's also because I have, like, the iPhone 12 Pro, and so I'm still kind of, like, in the Stone Age with respect to my iPhone capabilities, but I love to know that there are more options out there for people, and I would say too, like, if you're headed up into the Whites kind of anytime, it's always good to have someone that you're communicating with and sometime like, some type of plan. I think, Jim, you and I had probably one of the scariest days in the Whites ever on Mount Moosilauke, which is probably one of the easiest 4,000 footers, but we went up in a day that was a blizzard, and that happens, and it wasn't forecasted, so just be aware, like, it can be the most beautiful terrain in the world. It can also be some of the most dangerous. Mount Washington boasts that all the time of the worst weather ever recorded. And people, like, they'll scoff at it, but it's also kind of real. So just be aware when you're going up there, especially as it's getting colder. I think they got like hail or some type of snowy vibe the other day. So it can get cold there really fast.
Here's a little thing that I do because sometimes I tell people in my household where I'm going, but I don't realize they really like, yeah, yeah, you're going off somewhere. We're not really paying attention. And I get that. Like, I wouldn't be paying attention to me either. But what I do sometimes is I will make a route, whether this is a biking route or running route or some sort of adventure route, and I will leave that route in the route planner up on my computer and my app. So I have left multiple times where I'm like, I don't know if anybody knows where I'm going, but if they come to my computer, they're going to see a route on either Strava or Ride with GPS, and it's right there. And hopefully they'll put one of them together that he's probably on that line somewhere along there.
Yes, totally. And it's really, really important to whoever you communicate with, tell them, like, if you don't hear from me by X time, that's probably a red flag, and maybe it's just that you were taking your time out there, but set like a late in the afternoon time for a morning adventure. And then if no one's heard of you by 4 o'clock, like, I think that's a good sign that maybe you need some help. So communicate, don't not tell anyone if you're going out to do this stuff. And even better is if you can do it with a buddy. So that was a lot of adventuring. Probably our triathlon, our diehard triathlon listeners are like, when is this going to be over? Can we talk about triathlon? And luckily, I have a race report to share with you. It is not my own race, but I spent Sunday at a sprint triathlon. I was at the Cranberry Tri-Fest in Lakeville, Massachusetts, and I have some insights from my father-in-law, Dan, who has been featured on this podcast before. He crushed his third sprint triathlon, the second that I've coached him for. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, let's go. I reading through his notes, I'm such a sucker. I just love race reports because there's so much good advice in here and there's so many good takeaways. And again, I sort of like for my athletes and for myself. So yeah, I'm psyched to go through this.
Yeah. Okay. So Dan, to just refresh listeners' memories, had a great sprint try earlier this summer. He did the Cohasset Triathlon for the second time. First time was pretty rough, had some open water panic, which is super, super, super normal. I will say many of our listeners have been like, oh, wow, you guys have experienced panic in the open water. It's like, yes, everyone who's done a triathlon has probably experienced some level of panic in the open water at some point or some panic in some other situation. But anyway, open water is a very, very common place for that to happen. That had happened to him the first time. We sort of recovered it, did a lot of open water training to get him ready for his next Cohasset Triathlon, which was earlier this year. The swim went great. And then this time around, he had another tough time in the swim, kind of with that panicky feeling. And luckily, to kind of advance to the end of the story, he had a great race. He was able to regroup on the bike and the run. But I wanted to talk a little bit about this open water panic and what can potentially contribute to it. So I think in Dan's case, he had improved a lot in swimming, and that was actually the thing that kind of became his downfall because he took the Cohasset Triathlon earlier this year so easy. He said, my goal on the swim was what is the easiest I can go while still making forward progress, which I think is actually a really good mindset for many of our triathlon swimmers. Elites, obviously, yeah, you're going to go in there and you're going to blast it and you're going to try to win the race from the swim start. But if you are sort of middle back of the pack, just saying like, I just need to go slow as smooth, smooth as fast, or even just slow as smooth. We're just going to leave it at that, I think is really valuable. But I think he was so excited about his gains in swim fitness that he took off really, really hard. And I could see it from the beach. I was like, wow, he's swimming pretty fast. Like that is a strong start to this swim. I think in addition to that, there was no warm up at all for this swim. It wasn't up to him, but there was like no option to do any type of warm up. And with his wave, there was like an Olympic race that started first, and the aquabike folks go. And so he was basically standing on the beach for like 45 minutes, kind of waiting for the swim to start, getting tight, totally like not warmed up. And I think I don't have super great advice for what to do in that situation other than like do some dynamic activation, do some arm swings. But most importantly, if there's no warm up, you have to make the swim the warm up. Like that becomes your only option. And then I think lastly for him, like he absolutely crushed it in the pool, but just because of access to open water, he did not do a lot of open water swim practice. So again, the best way to get comfortable in your wetsuit in the open water is spending a lot of time in the open water. So if anything here resonates with you, if you're someone who really feels that panicking in the open water, think about number one, go so easy. Like play a game called What's the Easiest I Can Go while still making forward progress. And then usually probably, a couple hundred yards into the swim, if you're doing that, you will have adjusted. You're gonna be totally fine. And you can actually pick it up a little bit there if you feel good about it. But sometimes even going easy the whole time is great. Try to get in a warm up if you have access to a warm up. Again, sometimes you don't though. So that's just something to be aware of. And that means you need to take it nice and easy and then get in the open water as much as you can with respect to just like prepping for the race, because that will help you be a little bit more comfortable with it.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell my athletes, like, focus on the catch-up stroke and focus on just big, deep exhales under the water. And I mean, the good news and the bad news about most triathletes is that we have one speed, right? And so if you're just out there doing catch up and you're just focusing on your breath and you're focusing on good catch up, it turns out you're probably just doing your normal swim speed anyway.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then I do want to really call out Dan and say huge credit to him. I said he had a good bike and run, but I want to talk a little bit about mentally resetting after a bad swim. So I saw him kind of coming out of the water and he like looked a little bit defeated and he was just saying like that did not go well. And I sort of told him like, okay, but that's not relevant, not relevant, not relevant. Like it's time to reset because you have a bike and a run ahead of you. And honestly, I don't think that I necessarily had like the super empathetic response that may have been helpful in the moment of like, yeah, it's really, really hard. Instead, I was like, nope, not helpful, absolutely not helpful, and absolutely not relevant. But I think, we talked about it after, and I think that actually was helpful to him. We've talked about before how if you're having these negative thought patterns in a race, you have to ask yourself, is this thought helping my performance? And then cue some type of word or mantra like reset that can kind of help you move away from that. And he was able to do it. And then when I saw him coming after the bike, he just goes, that was so much better, a lot better, on to the run. And I'm like, yes, on to the run. That's exactly what we were looking for. And I was reflecting on how in triathlon, I think it's pretty cool that there are really natural opportunities to do a reset. I think that's a lot harder. Say if you're running like a marathon and at mile 4, your heart rate is really not where it's supposed to be and your pace is all over the place. Like you still have to run for another 22.2 miles. And that's really, really challenging. But in triathlon, if you have a bad swim, it's like, okay, close that chapter. And now I'm going to change the mode, the method, the training, the stats, everything into something different. It's going to be a bike. It's going to be a run. And just try to say like, this could be a story where I had a tough swim and then I rallied, which is often even more impressive than saying like everything went either badly the entire time or great the entire time. I think kind of the cool story of I came back after it was really hard and was able to do that reset is one of my favorite stories to hear from athletes of being able to reset kind of at any point in these races, but especially in between legs.
Yeah, I think well, so first couple points. One is that I don't know about you, Katie, but I have never gotten out of the water and looked at my watch and my swim time and thought, good job. Well, I just totally crushed it. I am so happy with my swim time. I think my response has always been, well, that was okay. Or most of the time it was like, oh wow, I'm 2 minutes slower than I thought it was going to be. Whether it was a sprint or Olympic or half, I was like, it's like that did not go as well as I thought it was going to go. So mental note for myself really is just like don't look at my watch, right? And I always had a hard time with resetting, right? I think I love this mantra of like reset, reset. And one thing that I adopted a little bit later on in my racing journey, which was get into transition, as you talk about, Katie. There's a great natural break, right? And to get into transition and just do 2 to 3 just deep breaths, right? As you're putting like maybe you're putting your bike shoes on, right? And you're just like taking a deep breath and just like breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out, and just being like, okay, I'm still moving forward. I'm still in transition here, but like I'm resetting here. I'm resetting with my breath. I really like that. And especially coming in off the bike as well, too, just sort of getting that couple big deep breaths while you're putting your shoes on and just sort of like calming yourself, coming back to center. I really like that a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And so shout out Stan, really crushed it. And I will say a hallmark of having a good race is what we talked about for the rest of the day was the next race that he wants to sign up for, like in 2026. So that's a really, really good sign. But one reflection that I did have just kind of spending the whole day with him after the race, and I have felt this before too, is sometimes you cross the finish line, you're like, wow, like I feel really, really good. Like I feel pretty awesome. And he's saying, like, oh yeah, like I could work out tomorrow. I'm not even sore, whatever. But then later in the day, he was like, "Oh wow, like I don't actually feel so good right now. Like I think I feel worse than after the Cohasset triathlon." And I think I was reflecting on the fact that there's a lot of adrenaline happening in the race environment, and that carries you for a little while after you cross the finish line. But it's super normal to feel really, really bad later in the day. So my advice on that is like just try to slam hydration, electrolytes, slam protein, like protein bomb, get a burger, whatever you're gonna do to really, really hit that protein and try to stay inside of and out of the sun, try to rest. And also just be aware that probably you're going to be kind of fatigued for a couple of days. I experienced this kind of the days after the Prezi and my FKT. I was like, this happened several days ago now, and I'm still tired going up the stairs, or I just don't have that same spark. I'm going for a run. It feels like my legs are really, really heavy. Be aware that some of the fatigue is going to be delayed even after that initial soreness has gone away, but give it time. And in my experience, for sprint triathlon, hopefully within about a week, you should feel better. For Ironman, it could be a month, honestly. For some of this big mountain stuff, I think they say sometimes like the number of miles in a run race, at least, is the number of days it takes you to feel really recovered. So a 5K might be 3 days. A marathon is almost a month, but give yourself that time. And in the meantime, still nail the hydration, still nail the fueling, even if you're in recovery mode. I think it's just as important.
Yeah, I think also too, something I was thinking about today was that because I've spent the last couple weeks just sort of taking it down a notch a little bit for myself, because I had a couple really big back-to-back weekends of bike riding, and what I was sort of thinking about today, why have I felt sort of just, sort of low energy? And I realized that I think in the beginning of the summer, in the first hot days, we're all getting heat adapted, right? And it's pretty hard. It's pretty difficult. And we get all these comments and training peaks and like, oh, this is really hard. I'm like, yep. But then after maybe a couple weeks of this heat and humidity, people get acclimated and adapted to it. And then I feel like we sort of levels out. And I felt really, for me personally, I felt really good. Like most of the summer, I always go out. I spent a lot of time out in the heat this summer, midday, working out. And I was so surprised at how adapted I was. But then I did a couple big weekends, right? And you have a lot of people who are doing late races here, and it's just asking a lot of the body. And I think at some point it starts to, I don't know if I say it wears out, but you sort of get worn down, right? So you have this fatigue. We talked about this before, this deep fatigue plus the heat. So these late season races, I think also sometimes can really just kind of, I think, set people back even more than maybe some of the races that happen in the beginning of the year when you're a little bit more fresh. And I know for me personally, like when I'd come back and race in September when I had a little bit more rest and things got cooler, I felt a lot better, right? I always had good races early and I had good races sort of late, but I never really had good races in the middle. Part of it, I just think, is just that mixture of the heat and the fatigue. So anyway, if you're feeling bad this time of year and you've just had a race, like probably it's a combination of a lot of different things.
Yeah, and just validating that it's normal. I mean, I feel like for me at least, I've only just started to get into this window of pregnancy where I like feel really good but can still do most of my normal stuff. And I also know there's an endpoint to that. Number one, because my body's going to change, it's just not going to be as doable. And number two, because I can't just stack Prezi after Prezi after Prezi every week and assume that my body's always going to be fine from that. So it's a fine line. I think you and I have experienced this for sure, Jim. We've talked about like in October when the weather's amazing and you have this scarcity mindset about like, okay, well, how long is the weather going to be amazing? And so I'm going to go out and do big stuff every single day. And then, October 28th rolled around and you're like, oh my gosh, I have never been so tired in my entire life before. And this was supposed to be the off season. I think we even feel that sometimes in the summer right now when you're like, wait, I actually got the good weather days. Like I'm going to blast it. But now I'm really tired and I still have the fatigue from all the training, the heat, all the racing, etc. So it's a balance. I don't think we have a great answer besides like there always will be more. I'm trying to remind myself that, not say like there's this impending decline where I'm not able to do it. It's more like there will be more and there will be cool comebacks and there will be the postpartum Prezi sometime next summer. But it's challenging and want to validate that basically at whatever stage of training or pregnancy or life you're in, it's totally, totally real.
We had in our outline, we were going to go into sort of talking about some race day anxiety, but I think that's a great segue, Katie, for advice for fall off season, right? You're talking about at some point you have to get off the bus, right?
Yes, yeah, and I'm like clinging to the seats of the bus, like you can't take me alive off this bus.
Exactly.
So
I feel the
yes, let's
same
talk
way.
about the fall off season
Yeah.
that I and you and probably everyone else needs.
Right. So yeah. So anyway, you're having conversations. every coach probably out there, run coach, triathlon coach, most triathlon coach are having this like, okay, what are we doing now, right? Like what's happening? It's fall. Some people are training for run races, but I'm talking to a lot of athletes now who just, need to take some sort of off season to some degree. Some people are saying to me like, okay, what do I do? Like, because now they're not going to be staring at training peaks. And I was like, okay, well, here's my general guidance, and Katie, fill in whatever you want. The first thing I tell people is like, hopefully it's nice weather. So what I'm going to do is I want you to go out and ride your bike. I want you to ride your bike just quite a bit, like, or just get out there and ride your bike, right? It preferably outside. Don't go on Zwift if you can avoid it, and go out and work on. It's a sneaky way to work on your bike skills. It's a sneaky way to continue to hold on to some fitness, right? And actually expand out your aerobic base as well too. A chance to explore new areas, right? If you've been on a TT bike, all summer, like you're probably on some very popular, flatter, easier roads because you're on a TT bike. But now the reins are off, right? And you're maybe on your road bike, maybe on your gravel bike, lots of new places to go. So that's my first advice is just, hey, go ride your bike.
I agree with this advice, and I would say don't ride your TT bike. Like, the advice here is specifically to ride a bike that is not a TT bike, so, like, hop on a road bike, hop on a gravel bike. I know people that love mountain biking, like, great time to do mountain biking, fat biking, whatever it is, but I think you need to get out of that aero position and out of those, like, flat kinda structured roads. I think the theme of your advice for biking here is actually exploring, so that's where I'd put biking in the same category as another recommendation that you have here for off-season, which is go hiking, find an adventure, but this is all sort of, like, explorer mindset without the same pounding of the pavement and hitting the laps in the pool and hitting the TT bike, especially if you're a triathlete.
Absolutely. I think the second one we talked a lot about, and actually many of my athletes have brought this up by themselves. I think this is the programming. The programming is working, Katie, with the podcast. But they've all mentioned strength. I want to do strength. I want to do strength work. I want to get strong this off season. And I'm like, oh, you're preaching to the choir, folks. So yeah, so start adding in some strength work. Lots of things you can do around there. And also, when I say strength work, I also want to mention mobility work. I know personally, I've been doing a little bit more mobility work recently, and I'm gonna start putting some links in to our show notes of mobility work that I find that I really like. And I'm just finding it's also making I just feel a lot better when I just do a little bit of, I mean, it doesn't take much mobility, but even if you do a little bit of mobility, maybe in the morning and maybe a little bit at night, it's just made a huge difference.
Oh, it makes a huge difference for me too, and I'm actually doing it a lot now because my PTs will be mad at me if I don't do it because of, like, pregnancy or whatever, but honestly, I think it helps me more for the adventures that I'm doing to be like, "All right, we're gonna open up the hips." I'm like, "I think this is maybe helping for pregnancy, but mostly it's just helping me do a Prezi," which is great, and honestly more motivating for me than just doing it, like, for something that's happening way in the winter.
Yeah, absolutely right. So we mentioned before, hiking, go outside, have any kind of outside adventure. If you are training a little bit, yeah, you could train for a marathon, or you could train for like the like fall running races around. There can be like a foliage 5K or something, right? That could be something. So I know some of our athletes, they want some focus, right? But we don't want to have a lot of focus, but we have some focus. And there can be, yes, and there can be some intensity. It doesn't have to all be easy in the fall. You definitely do want to bring in some intensity into your running, into your biking, but not a lot, right? And not a lot of structure, right? So anyway, don't try to maintain your peak swim and bike and run fitness. Instead, just focus on sort of general fitness.
And I will say this advice comes in kind of after you've probably taken, say, a 2-week break of, like, really minimal stuff. So we've talked about, like, hey, I'm gonna take a break from, like, most structured swim, bike, run after an Ironman, for example. I tell people, like, 2 to 4 weeks, just literally chill out and, like, do yoga and go to Pilates if you want to, and do random things that are very, very different from your general routine. I think sometimes people get tempted to say, like, okay, I did an Ironman yesterday, and now it's time to do a Prezi, ride 100 miles, but they said to do it on the podcast, like, do some hills. All of this is after you've taken, like, that true break of rest and recovery, which I think is important after every race. So let's say, like, outside of that 2 to 4 week buffer, you're totally good to start doing this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Things you don't need to worry about. Swimming. Of course, we hardly ever worry about swimming anyway, but swimming, yeah.
I've never
Do
worried
it.
about swimming for a day in my life, Jim. Thank you for the
Exactly.
permission to not worry.
So anyway, swimming. Hey, you could do it once a week. You could skip a few weeks. You could skip a couple months, especially if you have a swim background. And we talked about this before. If you put in the work in the pool at some point in your life, you could be able to leverage that and you'll be able to get those skills back. So, right. I wouldn't worry much about swimming. Or you know what? You can take paddles and buoy, and if it's still warm in your local lake, go out and have an open water swim with your friends. So things also not to do. I would suggest not spending a lot of time on the Zwift or Training Peaks Virtual. I know it's hard because some folks are have very much time constraints and maybe can't get outside during the week, during the work week. But anyway, if you are on the indoor trainer, I would just say just keep it moderate, keep it easy, ride a variety of courses, find the ones that you really enjoy. There's also lots of events happening on Zwift and Training Peaks Virtual, like almost every 30 minutes, there's a group ride or there's a race or something. So again, sort of keep it easy because I always tell athletes, when December rolls around, like we're going to be in the train a lot. And I just want you to arriving at December 1st being happy to be on your trainer or like looking forward to being on your trainer. Don't want you to get to December 1st and be like, I've been riding my trainer all fall and I'm kind of sick of it already. It's like, oh no, 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 let's not do that.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think this goes for like, think about other modalities. If you need like a quick indoor fitness thing, there are also other things that you can be doing right now. I understand that for some people, it's like 5 in the morning, it's getting dark out. Like you need to do something that's different. But I still think that there are ways to keep Zwift really unstructured and fun. And that's why I would not just plug in like, okay, I might as well start base because we are going to start base December 1st. So like, don't do the base workouts now because it's just going to be the exact same thing kind of come December 1st. And only do stuff like Zwift if you're like, wow, my heart is singing to me that I really, really want to get on Zwift. Like my heart is singing to head to Watopia. Like hopefully that's not happening, but that is the only reason you should be doing that right now. Because I don't want people to feel like they have to. I think there's a lot of have to. And obviously we're all recreational athletes and no one really has to do any of this. But I think sometimes just if you hold yourself to that, like, okay, well, this is how I was doing it earlier in the season. Tell yourself like, okay, well, maybe I'm going to try a 2 off days a week thing, or I'm going to try something new like yoga or whatever it is, or I'm going to just switch up my routine. I think that's the best way to get yourself mentally refreshed for December 1st, which is actually your most important job in the fall off season. I think a lot of that can come from unstructured hiking, biking, adventuring and stuff. But if you find that it's wearing you down mentally, that's exactly what we're trying to undo during this time.
We keep referencing December 1st, folks, because that's when a lot of our structured athletes start back up again. And the reason why we say December 1st and not January 1st is that we sort of build into that. December 1st, we've probably had some discussions and, starting in November, we're starting to talk to returning athletes, right? People are going to start a structured program, right? And we're saying, okay, let's talk about things. Let's get things sort of organized. We'll get going on December 1st. And then what's built in is that there'll be probably 2 weeks of like, oh, structured training, sort of getting your schedule back again. Like, oh, what's the pool schedule? When do I go to a run group? And you sort of work out these details in December. And then we recognize the holidays happen, right? And everybody should be, again, it's sort of off season again, honestly. And I always tell all my athletes, I put it right in Training Peaks. I said, this is a holiday season. And I don't want you to think about being an athlete for this last 2 weeks, right? Because you're going to probably have family and friends around in events, and work events, and whatever else, right? So don't be the person who has to be like, I have to leave early to go do my structured run workout. No, 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 no. So anyway, so when I say December 1st, what I really mean is that, yeah, we get going, you get into flow routine. Maybe you buy some new gear. Maybe you're getting a new trainer. You're getting it all set up. You're getting your computer updated and seeing if you can connect your trainer to your laptop. Do that all in December. The holidays come around. Don't worry about it. And then when January 1st comes around, it's like, okay, good, you're ready. You get your gear, you get your schedule, you've been looking at Training Peaks, everything's seamless and worked out, and now we're ready to go. So when I say December 1st, what I'm really saying is that we're really kind of getting going January 1st.
Agreed. Yeah. I have athletes who say, like, all right, we're going to start January 1st. And inevitably, that usually means like January 15th, just because there's all this startup and like there's always holiday travel. And then there's a weekend that comes in and we're programming for a Monday. And it turns into this whole thing where it is like usually a solid 2 weeks after that. So if you have like an August race, great. You probably don't even need to start until February, March or something. But if you are looking at kind of like those June races, May races, which is when a lot of people start up, I agree. December 1st is awesome. It's crazy. It's like just the beginning of September right now, and we're already talking about this, but it's coming sooner than we think. The off season always goes by really, really fast. So think about your season planning and think about races that you might want to do. We can also link, we've got about 1 million episodes that reference things like season planning, and that's something you might be thinking about now as well.
Katie, we have a lot more on our outline, but I think we only have time for like maybe one more. What do you want to tackle?
Well, we got a really good question, a second good question that I
Oh,
feel like we should
yes.
have a quick
Yes.
discussion on. We're talking about weighted vests. So let's do the little weighted vests segment.
Oh, yeah.
Someone asked us, like, okay, weighted vests are all the rage. What do we think about weighted vests? And I have some thoughts. I have not actually admittedly looked into the science behind this very much, but this listener was kind of asking, like, are they really helpful for building strength, building bone density, stuff like that? Is this a substitute for strength training in general? What do we think? So maybe I'll share my sort of off the cuff reaction to weighted vests, and then Jim, you can weigh in.
Sure. We're happy to off the cuff and we're always happy to be wrong. So we're going to give you our opinions or our experience. I have a little bit of experience with weighted vest stuff, and both you and I actually have experience with carrying weight uphill. So that's
Yes.
actually kind of relevant here. So anyway, that's far away.
So I think that probably walking with a weighted vest is marginally better than going for just a walk regularly. Like if you have your 10 to 15 pound vest on and you're going for a walk, that probably is a little bit more fitness benefit than plain walking. However, plain walking in general, it's good for you. And also, it's not necessarily training in the sense of I think it's going to make you much, much, much better at swimming, biking, and running. Part of that is because humans are just really, really efficient at walking, especially fit humans. And therefore, you're not really doing a ton for your overall fitness level if you're just kind of taking very, very easy walks. Again, maybe a marginal gain if you put on that weighted vest. I also think that you are not getting anywhere near the adaptations that you would get from heavy weighted strength in the gym by doing weighted vest. So weighted vest is something that you could fold in if you want like a little enhancement to your cardio routine, thinking about putting a weighted vest on and going to do stair stepper, Harvard Stadium's incline walking on the treadmill, some type of hike. But none of this is replacing that heavy, heavy weighted strength in the gym. I would say if you want to get into, we were talking about strength before, hire a professional for getting into heavy weighted strength if it's first time. I've also linked in the show notes, there's a lot of video-based programs out there. So EC Fit Performance Strength, usually they're subscription-based, but maybe a little bit more affordable than actually hiring a professional. Again, you could also hire a professional for just 1 or 2 sessions to learn those movement patterns. But yeah, all this is to say, like, do it if you want to, but I just don't think it's a substitute. And most of our athletes are doing so much different training that you don't really need to fold in like walking with a weighted vest. Hopefully, you're also just getting in like some good running, some good biking, some good swimming. And the other thing that I'm a little skeptical on is I think given that these are not super heavy usually, I think they're on the order, most vest models are probably like 10, 15, maybe 20 pounds max. Like you could just fill up a good backpacking pack with some stuff, or you could put like 3 liters of water into your Solomon 12-liter pack that you're using for hiking and then hike up a mountain. And that seems to be kind of the same thing. So I don't know, when people buy things that are, marked up in price because they're all the rage, we've seen like the very fancy Stroop waffles made by this special like endurance company. And then you're like, hold on, you can get these at the store for like 12 for the same price as one in this running store. I get a little skeptical of it. So yeah, those are my thoughts, Jim. What do you think on weighted vests?
I'm with you 100%. Yeah, I love it. I do. I think take your laptop backpack and add 2 water bottles and walk around the neighborhood. And yeah, it's not as sexy as the slim black one, but it's the same exact effect. I agree. Yeah, no, I think you're right on with. Yeah, it can be a little bit of an add-on for stairs, for incline. I love the Harvard Stadium thing. Right, right. Anything like that. Like, yeah, a little extra challenge. Sure, it's always going to help. And Katie, you and I have been. What I find what's interesting with this weighted vest thing is that you and I have been on the weighted carry thing for a long time for our triathletes and our mountain athletes because it's a great way to get some extra strength in walking up, say, a ski hill or a trail run or up a mountain, right? So one of my favorite things to do when I'm is usually when in the springtime when I'm trying to get mountain legs is I will carry more water up to the top of a mountain. And the best part is you go up to the top of a really popular mountain and you pull out all these water bottles and you walk around with people and say, hey, does anybody want any water? Because I'm just going to dump it out. And it's the quickest way to make friends because people go, oh my gosh, this person sitting on this 4,000-foot mountain, maybe they're an AT wrecker, and you're standing there with like 3 extra liters of water. And you're like, I'm just going to dump it out. Who wants it? And you'll have people come running to you. So anyway, it's a great way to get strong, help get strong. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily, I found it's funny. I actually bought a weighted vest a long time ago. I way overbought. It probably came with like 60 pounds, and I immediately took a bunch of the weights out. And actually, I took those individual weights out, which I think are just kind of sandbags, basically. And I actually put them in just a small backpacking pack that I had, and I used that to walk up the skiway. So I didn't even use the vest. I just was using my own backpack.
So yeah, there you go. Come for the advice on weighted vests and stay for the tips on making friends, which is go up the hill. And if you have a weighted vest, you can't give anything to anyone. But if you have water, that is a skill. That is something that you can share. So really good advice for challenge of the week here, which is just to carry water up a hill and make friends doing it. I love it. Okay, well, I think we have a lot of other content that I think we'll push to the next episode, which means very little work for us on the next outline. Super exciting. But let's shift gears to challenge of the week and gear pick of the week. Jim, what is your challenge of the week?
My challenge of the week is because I've been doing this, is I've been exploring YouTube for mobility sessions and ideas. But yeah, just go out there and just try a bunch of different things, right? And you'll find the things that work for you. And I'm linking one here. It's called the 21-minute cyclist flexibility routine by this guy Tom Merrick, who seems fairly normal. Sometimes you get these, you never know what you're gonna find on YouTube. You'll find some strange stuff on YouTube, but this guy seems fairly normal. And I've been doing some of his stuff. I haven't been doing the full 20 minutes. Honestly, I've been doing maybe 5 minutes of it and just sort of picking and choosing. And he has a PDF download of the exercises that he's doing for free. So I just downloaded that and I found that super useful.
That's awesome. And I will also recommend we mentioned EC Fit before. That's another really good YouTube mobility is Erin Carson, she is this strength coach out of Boulder. She trains like Taylor Knibb and Renee Carfrey and Tim O'Donnell and all these other really great folks out there. And she has these Monday mobility videos that I'm always recommending to some of our athletes. She's still putting them out. She's going on like 5, 6, 10 years maybe of every Monday there's a new mobility video. So I also recommend those. She's really, really fun and just an awesome person to follow. All right. So I have mentioned on the podcast a couple of times, I have moved in Boston. I moved literally 0.3 miles away from where I was before, but I have more storage in this new place, and moving is always a great cue to organize your gear. So my challenge of the week is organize your race gear at the end of the season, because you will thank yourself come May, June of next year when you're like, oh my gosh, where is my race belt? Do I even own a race belt? And the answer is always yes. You own 4 race belts because they're like $3 each, but you always buy a new one because you don't know where they are. So I had a lot of fun kind of going through all of my gear. I found that I had so many duplicates of things that I was just like, I don't know where my CR2032 heart rate strap batteries are. Like, I'm going to buy some more of those because they're not expensive. And then it turns out I have enough of those for every single podcast listener. So send me an email. I'll send you a free battery if you really need one. But there's a lot of stuff that I think we just like accumulate over time, and it's really nice to be super streamlined about it. So I've been doing a lot with like different storage organizing cubes. So if you can say like, okay, this is all the bike tools, this is all the batteries, this is all the rags, this is all the chain lube. And then you move into like, this is the micro spikes and this is the packs or whatever it is. It's been really, really fun. And it's gotten me fired up for adventures because I know where everything is to bring on those adventures. So organize your race gear.
Yeah, I mean, gear organization, I think, is one of my love languages. So you're talking my language here, which goes into, hey, it's also a great transition into my gear pick of the week, which is for gear organization and for on the go. I recommend this before, is the LL Bean canvas tote bag. I have this for everybody, for all my sports. I have 2 for cycling, which is live right next to the door, and one of them is just for everything I'm going to use, like usually in the summertime. It's the main one I grab, but I also have a second one which has like extra coats, extra vests, whatever, just extra stuff in it, right? So as soon as the fall comes around, the winter comes on, I'll actually take 2 bags out. But I love my LL Bean canvas tote bags for individual sports.
Yes, and the poor man's version of that is like reusable shopping bags also work pretty well. Most people use those for groceries. I literally use them to be like, this is the run one and this is the bike one and all that. So if you need your storage cubes to be portable, you put them in bags like this. You have the bougie version of the LL Bean canvas tote bag. I love that that's like bougie. When LL Bean is bougie, you know you're in the right place.
Well, okay, and I'll give you a pro tip on the LL Bean canvas tote bag.
Okay.
Is you go to the LL Bean outlet stores, and they have a whole bunch of LL Bean canvas tote bags with people's initials on them that obviously they got returned or never picked them up. But you can pick up for half price. You can pick up, my initials are JJA, but I may end up with like STR or something. So like or like it just has her name on, like, it's like his name is Tom. I was like, yep, I have Tom's canvas bag, but it was 50% off because Tom returned it.
That's so funny. I'm looking for one that says SBR, and that can be your triathlon tote bag, and it'll be perfect. Or you could just be like, all right, this one's like, it's got a B, that's for bike, and this one's got an R, and that's for run. And it's like, Rhonda, my tote bag is for my running gear. That's fantastic. Yeah, really, really good. Challenge of the week pro tip there. I feel like we need a pro tip of the week thing because that is like the best pro tip I've ever heard. My gear pick of the week, I mentioned already, it is not even gear, it's a snack, but Rice Krispie treats are the secret best ever endurance fuel, in my opinion. I recently took a big stack of Rice Krispie treats on my FKT adventure, and they are like a little bit chewy, I will say. Towards the end of that, when I was really pushing, I was slamming beta fuel, which is also the best endurance fuel ever. But again, if you look at the carb content, it's like goes down really easy. There's not a lot of ingredients there. It's basically just sugar in a tasty format that tastes like my childhood. So check it out. This is similar to stuff like, Oreos are a really amazing endurance fuel or other stuff like that. And you might just not have considered before that this stuff is cheap, this stuff is delicious, and nutritionally, it is almost exactly the same as most of your fancy bars.
Absolutely.
All
I think
right.
we did it, Katie.
We did it. Yeah, this was
Yeah.
a good episode. We have so many other things to cover, which makes me excited for future episodes. And we are closing in on episode 100. So looks like we will still have content for it. But yes, please continue sending us questions and comments. These have been really, really good for building out our outlines and ensuring that we don't actually get to the topics that we want to talk about, which is probably better for all of you. And so, yeah, reach out. You have our emails, jim@theendurancedrive.com, katie@theendurancedrive.com, or you can check out our feedback form, which is always linked in the show notes, and always check out our extended show notes for notes on all the things we talked about. Leave us a rating, leave us a review, share the podcast, lots of advice. But as always, thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.
Thanks, peeps.